We're back with our cognitive behavioral therapy book. We're in chapter 10. Had a quick flick through. It looks like we might have to break chapter 10 up into two parts. Intervention steps practiced by cognitive behavioral therapy counselors and professionals. As a counselor, these are the steps you have to follow with your client. We'll take the case of depression because this is the most common. If you have a client who is suffering from depression, follow the steps below. Step 1. Find the problem area in your life. When somebody's depressed, it's very easy to say, "I'm depressed." That blanket statement, unfortunately, doesn't really say much. You're just sharing your emotional state. It's also a clinical diagnosis. It may turn out that you're just sad. Depression, in medical terms, is tightly defined. There's a lot of things that go into depression. Usually, people use the word very casually. Regardless, the first step is to find the problem areas in your life. What causes this frustration that leads to depression? Is it your relationship? Is it your job or your business? Does this have something to do with school or health and fitness? Are you having problems with regret? Maybe you feel you picked the wrong spouse. Maybe you think that you were stuck in the wrong job. Regardless, you need to be clear about what parts of your life make you sad or depress you. Step 2. Be conscious and aware of your automatic thoughts. This is where the rubber meets the road. It's easy to say that you have problem areas in your life. Maybe you're stressed out or depressed about not having any money. That part is easy. You have to look at what triggers your automatic thoughts. Is that the time of the month when you get that big fat envelope from the credit card company with a huge debt balance? Does it involve your landlord knocking on your door asking for the month's rent? Whatever the case may be, zero in on what triggers your automatic thoughts of depression or extreme sadness. Look for your triggers. These are not always external. A trigger doesn't have to take the form of a person. It doesn't have to play out as some sort of situation. It can also be a memory. It's not unusual for people to feel really angry or anxious when an image flashes through their mind. Maybe it's the image of your father who abandoned you as a kid. Maybe it's the image of an ex who betrayed you by screwing around behind your back. Maybe it's the image of the school bully who humiliated you on a daily basis. Perhaps it's the face of your boss you love to hate. Maybe it's a very humiliating experience in the past where a lot of kids ganged up on you, beat you up, or laughed at you. Whatever the case may be conscious of your automatic thoughts. Don't automatically assume that just because a certain image flashes through your mind, there's really one way to respond. You may even be thinking that this is the only natural way. It isn't. It's all in your head. You think it's natural, but it turns out that it isn't. It may turn out that you are responding in the least optimal way. Step 3. Analyze your automatic thoughts and their impact on your decisions. The cognitive behavioral therapist will first get the patient to lay out what they think automatically. For example, you went through several bad breakups when you were in high school or in college. These really damaged your self-esteem and your self-confidence. They were quite traumatic. The therapist will ask you to describe what happened. He or she will then ask you to describe what you think about these memories now and how they impact the way you think, what you talk about, and what you do. From this point, the therapist will also ask you how your decisions are impacted by your interpretations of these facts. Through this process, the patient will be the one to realize that the decisions or actions he or she takes may not be all that rational. They may be blowing things out of proportion. They may have lost all perspective. They may be reading too much into what happened in the past, and this is leading them to constantly make the same wrong decisions over and over again. What's important to note here is that the therapist is not the one drawing these conclusions. It is not as if the person will say to your face after you tell them what's going on that you are wrong. It's not their job. Their job is to facilitate your self-discovery process, so you see the disconnection between how you're judging reality and what you base that judgment on. You yourself will see the disconnection. You yourself will see that you're drawing all these irrational conclusions from facts. These facts are not going to go away. Yes, somebody broke your heart. Yes, you got sexually abused. Yes, you got beaten down and physically abused. Those are not going to go away. Facts are facts. What can go away is the irrational decision, or at the very least, the decisions that you make that are not all that optimal. These decisions continue to hurt you again and again in the here and now. Step 4. Recognize negative patterns and actively distance yourself from them. The first step to change is not to destroy all negative links. That's too much to ask for. Instead, now that you know where your negative decisions and emotional states are coming from, you need to pay attention to what triggers them. Pay attention to the almost automatic process of you perceiving something or remembering something and then feeling negatively. And just as quickly, doing something negative. It's as if you were trying to stop a roller coaster or a runaway train. I'm sure you know that that's almost impossible. The good news is, by simply being aware of all these connections, you start getting perspective. You start realizing that you don't have to go through the same process that you have habitually gone through. This is the same process that made you feel really lousy at the end. It doesn't have to end up that way. By understanding how all of these are connected, you start labeling this as something negative. You position yourself to eventually walk away from that old chain reaction. The first step to creating a better reaction is to recognize and then put yourself in a position to walk away. This can take quite a while. Don't expect any overnight miracles. You've been thinking negatively for so long. The negative decisions that you have made impacted your life profoundly. It would be too much to expect for you to break out of this overnight. But step 4 is a significant step because it positions you to have the ability to stop thinking negatively. You're not quite there yet, but this is a turning point. Step 5. Actively combat every underlying assumption you make. When you engage in automatic thinking, you're basically allowing yourself to get carried away by your assumptions. You let them get the better of you. This doesn't have to be the case. This doesn't have to happen, believe it or not. One way you can take the power out of this automatic chain reaction is to question the assumptions behind what triggers you. For example, you're walking into a class, and this extremely attractive member of the opposite sex starts laughing in your general direction. As you get closer, that person laughs some more. The negative interpretation of this scene is so obvious that it doesn't need explanation. You're probably interpreting this in a very negative way. Your assumption is that person is laughing at you. Question that assumption. Are there facts to suggest this person is not laughing at you? Pay attention to what's happening in the scene. Do you remember it clearly? Is somebody whispering to that into that person's ear and then pointing to himself or herself and making some sort of gesture? It may well be that that person is joking with the person, laughing. It might turn out that that person is making a joke of herself or himself. Believe it or not, that scene you keep playing out in your mind of that personal insult, humiliation and embarrassment might not be all about you. In fact, it might not have anything to do with you. It might have been everything to do with the inside joke those two people were sharing. Question your assumptions, because if you don't, this will remain invisible. Those details will not exist in your mind. All you see... I lost my spot. All you see is the person laughing at you. All you can dwell on is your scene of embarrassment and humiliation. Think of it like a movie scene. You see that person laughing, there are a lot of other people around that person, there's all sorts of commotion. And then there's you walking through the scene. If you think that that person's actions are all about you, and this was some sort of personal insult, what do? Well, you basically crop out the rest of the scene. It's as if everything turns black and white and fades into the background, and the only thing that is in live, vivid color is the person laughing. This is not a realistic movie. There are many other details out there. Believe it or not, these details provide context, and this context might not lead to the conclusion that you automatically jump to. Do not be afraid to question your assumptions. Allow yourself to be wrong. Allow yourself to believe that there are alternative explanations. Otherwise, you're going to get hit by that freight train of emotions. It just hits you at full speed and power because you have assumed too much. Knock out its power by looking at your assumptions. It may well turn out that things are not what you think they are. At the very least, you will put yourself in a position to interpret the scene in such a way that you are emotionally neutral. Forget about a positive interpretation. Let's assume that it's not possible. At least shoot for something neutral. You don't have to constantly beat yourself up. Step 6. Try to see things from a positive perspective. Perspective is an art form. It's not a science. Different people can come up with different perspectives. That's just the way it is. Some people have an instinct or a knack for gaining perspective. They just zoom out and see the big picture. They see the different pieces of the puzzle. Other people cannot do that. They dwell on one particular detail and allow it to eat away at them. Chances are if you're reading this book, you are more likely the latter than the former. That's okay. There's no right or wrong answer. What's important is you understand the power of positive perspective and you actively work towards it. I don't care if you are automatically a negative person. I don't care how long you've been thinking negatively. You have it in you to gain this positive perspective. You just have to claim it. You just have to practice it day after day after day. It takes work. It's kind of like going to the gym. Remember the first time you hit the weights at the gym? It was murder. No other word would do the experience justice. I mean, your muscles were very flabby and weak and even flat. When you started lifting weights, you put a lot of pressure on your muscles and they hurt. But the secret is, when your muscles get sore, that's precisely when you decide to keep going to the gym. Because your muscles have a memory. And if they absorb all of that constant pressure, they quickly tighten. You move out of the soreness phase and your muscles start to fall into place. That's how it works. Don't let the pain throw you off. The same goes with trying to see events and situations from a positive perspective. There are many different perspectives out there. You're just going to have to identify the positive ones and continue to hammer on them until they become part of your consciousness. You have to continue picking these until these become your default standard. It's not easy, but it can be done. Just as it isn't easy to go to the gym day after day, even if your body is aching, it can be done, and you will be richly rewarded for it. Step 7. Destroy the power of the worst case scenario. Now that you have the ability to look at things in a more positive perspective, the next step is to understand that the reason you feel so negatively or you get thrown off is because you always assume the worst case scenario. For example, you go to a job interview and the recruiter looks at your resume, then looks at you and gives you a weird look. You can interpret this as essentially signaling that you are unemployable. You interpret this as a sign of failure, that you're some sort of unemployable loser. What is the worst case scenario? The employer will not hire you. So what? Ask yourself the question, so what? What happens next? Well, you know what happens next. You go down the list. There's another employer out there. There are tons of online job sites. There are government jobs. There are jobs in your neighborhood and other options. The problem with the worst case scenario is that it forces you to look at what you're going through as some sort of ultimate disaster. You get into this mindset and there's nothing beyond what's going on in front of you. But think about it. Is that the worst thing that can happen? Your partner leaves you, you get sick, you get fat, and you can't get the job or promotion, you get fired. Now what? When you ask yourself these two questions, you start seeing perspective. You start robbing the worst case scenario of its tremendous power. These questions, of course, are now what and so what. Keep asking yourself these questions. When you notice that you're entering a negative frame of mind. When you have identified your assumptions, keep asking these questions. Use them as some sort of battering ram against the deep-seated beliefs that you have had about yourself, your competence, your value as a person, and other important beliefs. You have to understand that these things are only as powerful as you imagine them to be. They draw their power from you. If you refuse to give them power by constantly asking, so what? And now what? You start seeing that there's another world out there. Another world that you can take action in. All is not lost, believe it or not. Step 8. Work based on facts. Let's get one thing clear. Changing how you think about things takes a lot of work. We also have a lot of fantasies and hopes and wishes regarding our lives. It's not unusual for people to work based on hopes and wishes and dreams. Some get quite far. Unfortunately for most people, this doesn't work. They get stuck in some sort of holding pattern. It's as if they're chasing their tail. The reason for this is that they're not looking to rebuild their lives and transcend their present realities using facts. This is the key. Base your personal change on reality. As I mentioned above, facts are facts. You got abused, you got fired unjustly, people slandered you, people hurt you for no good reason, so on and so forth. The list is endless. Now what? So what? Look at the facts. Are they a complete and total disaster? For example, your partner left you after several years together. Does this mean that it's the end of the world? When you look in the mirror, do you see somebody who is just completely unacceptable and so repugnant that nobody in their right mind would want to spend time with you or find value in you? Of course not. Look at the fact that you're still alive, that you can still give, that you can still share. There are just so many things out there, and if you're honest enough, you have a long list of the things that you can offer. These are facts. They're not going to go away. They're just as solid as the facts of the negative experience or your negative situation. These are the building blocks of a new perspective. People who are able to achieve long-lasting change in their lives persist because they have built the change on facts. They don't build a new life based on what they hope to be true or they assume to be true. That's not going to work. That's like trying to build a huge structure on sand. It only takes one storm to destroy that building. Are you building your new life on the sand of wishes and hopes and dreams? Focus on the facts. Do you have a job? Do you have skills? Can you speak well enough? These are the types of questions you should ask yourself if you keep coming up with the conclusion that you're unemployable. You'll never ever make enough money. And other toxic beliefs that hold you back and drag you down from living your fullest potential. Focus on facts. The fact that you're alive is a big deal. The fact that both your kidneys are working and your lungs are in good shape, those are big deals. Build your new assumptions and your new perspective on facts. This way, you're realistic. You're not trying to bend reality and insert stuff that doesn't really exist because it's not sustainable. You're definitely welcome to try, and I'm sure you can achieve some results. But if you really are looking for something sustainable that will withstand the test of time, build on reality. Build on facts. We're going to cut it there. We're going to continue with chapter 10 in the next episode. Stage 9, take ownership of your perceptions. And step 10, approach your personal change with a sense of urgency. So we're going to continue that in the next episode. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time.